I suppose in the end, you get this sense of destiny or fatalism that, you know, you can't really avoid it, and you said that you won't let it go under, because at this point liquidation is a real possibility.
When it looked as if there was a possibility that Palace could fold, I think a great many people thought, well, we've got to do whatever we can to try and stop this happening.
To actually come that close to maybe going out of business, it was unthinkable, really, to be fair.
There was a spontaneous demonstration on the bank holiday Monday before the new owners were going through the process of trying to get the club. It's a good couple of thousand Palace fans. I remember the Homesdale fanatics coming around the corner like a medieval Swiss army with flags and banners waving. It was a very moving and emotional moment.
They were concerned that the fans would get a little bit exuberant, and actually they did. They actually got in here.
Despite all stuff in the media, no one came in for Palace. So Steve, I think, got the call, it's down to you guys or it's going into liquidation.
I've always been involved with businesses that were underdogs, so I bought a business that was then called Ad Plates, and basically we transformed it into a global leader in implementation for marketing. I like a group of investors, if you like, but I wanted them to be Palace fans.
I was from up in Norwood, where I was brought up, so I was sat in the Arthur Waite, because that's the first stand you come to when you come down Beulah Hill. I'd never been in a box, I'd never been in a director's box, I'd never been in really anywhere but the Arthur Waite, and the odd trip to the Homesdale when I was a teenager. When I was 8 or 9, I went to my first Palace game, and I've been a supporter ever since. The idea that there wouldn't be any Palace anymore was a big problem, and I just happened to be financially able to do something. So I thought it was kind of my responsibility, really. Well, Steve had been the back of the shirt sponsor. Tag was on the back of the shirts, and Martin had been on the front with Churchill. So they knew each other a bit. And then I heard about this Steve Parish consortium, and my brother-in-law works in advertising, so got me Steve's number. And I rang him up, and I was kind of hoping he'd say, yeah, we've got a consortium of 7 or 8 people and it's all going to happen. But he said to me, well, actually, I haven't really got anyone. I've got a promise from Martin that he'll help, but that's it. There is no consortium. So I said, oh, well, you know, maybe I can do something. And he got in his car, and he was in my office in about half an hour.
You could tell he was a decent, brilliant bloke who just absolutely loved the club so much.
I said, all right, well, if you can get 4 people, I'm in 25%. And then we went to see Jeremy Hosking, who'd rung the club out the blue. Jeremy was more of an armchair fan, but Jeremy's very passionate about Palace. I've been a Palace fan since 1969. I was brought up in Upper Norwood. Steve since the early 70s, brought up in Forest Hill. Martin was brought up in Streatham and has been going the longest of all of us. So yeah, all of us did it because it was Palace, absolutely.
Looking at the deal in detail, it became more apparent just how complicated it was. There was clearly very little future for a football club that didn't own its own stadium.
It goes back to the time of Ron Nodes. So Ron Nodes owned the whole thing. Mark Goldberg came along rather naively, paid too much for it, couldn't afford to pay for it all in the end. So Ron Nodes kept the stadium. That all went south. And then Simon Jordan bought the club but didn't own the stadium. He then claimed that he had bought the stadium, but he hadn't.
The company that owned the stadium, Rock Investments, had gone into administration, was effectively then owned by a bank, HBOS, and then the bank, because of the financial crisis, went into administration. The government told Lloyds Bank to take over HBOS.
So the bank ended up owning this little piece of South London.
Which left us trying to negotiate a price on a piece of land, and they paid 12 million for some reason for the stadium. I think because they wanted to develop it as flats or whatever. And of course we were offering them 3.5 as a football stadium. So it was a desperately complicated situation, and one that didn't look like it could be unlocked because we just couldn't get anybody to pay attention.
Steve created an account called CPFC 2010 on the bulletin board, put a message explaining the situation.
I just couldn't see how it could be done. I sat on my sofa and probably learned the power of football in everybody's lives, wrote a statement outlining why it wasn't possible, and it just wouldn't happen. Within 5 seconds, it seemed, it was running as a banner underneath the Sky Sports News that was going out, and the note that I sent precipitated an incredible chain of events. the next day I woke up and there were 3,000 fans outside Lloyds Bank in London. And very, very quickly we received a phone call saying, look, we need to sit down and talk to you about this football stadium.
You don't normally get the administrator of a failing business to sell it because his customers get so worked up on television. But that really was brilliant, the way the fans got behind the club and almost forced the hand to make them sell the club to us.
What Steve did and what the fans did by protesting at Lloyds was persuade them that they had to sell it at a reasonable price to the owners of the club and it couldn't be redeveloped.
Sales of players have been delayed, a deal is close.
I said, look, let's just make it 25% each. I just want to get the club back on its feet.
And the four of us just agreed to do it between us on a handshake. There was nothing written down.
And it was such trust. I didn't have a deal with the other three guys. So I signed for the club effectively and bought it. And then the other three came in as they promised with their funding.
It was an amazing and incredibly complicated deal which Steve pulled off.
So we ended up owning a football club.
The fans unlocked the whole situation. The last two owners had ended in financial peril. It affected them not just business-wise, it affected them personally. So people were really worried around me, why have you done this, you know? And I remember saying to somebody, because it made me think about it, because it matters. And in your life, something has to matter, you know, after your family and your business and things. What matters, you know, for most of us is our football team.